I'm going to try and bring a little bit of magic into your portfolio. That's what we're going to try and do. And it's all about maximizing your assets. And in 3 different ways, we're going to look at this. And I don't have much time to do this, but we're going to try and do it anyway. Maximize your assets. So in other words, taking care of your properties, taking care of your cash flow, taking care of your portfolio is what I'm going to try and crash through in the next 20 minutes or so. And I'm going to start with maximizing your assets. In other words, looking after those properties, and really in 4 key ways. Thinking about quality tenants, thinking about quality management, quality of the build, the quality of materials, actually 5 different ways, quality of the care. And Sharon has already taken us through how we go about finding, defining and recruiting, if you like, our quality tenants, and how we then go through a quality management process. We've talked about the dark side, Steve's talked about that, and Sharon's talked about some of the ways in which you can really kind of add value, if you like, into that management layer with some of those tips. Now, I'm not going to spend any time today talking about how you build quality into your properties and how you build quality through the materials that you use. Those are topics for another day and maybe another webinar, but they are certainly key, because in terms of looking after your properties, maximizing the benefit from your properties, having properties that are robust in nature, that have been built well and that will last the test of time is really key. So I'm going to plunge straight into kind of quality care. And what do I mean by quality care? Well, I mean this. I mean starting out as you mean to continue, getting those inventories right. Quality inventories means that you then can sort of track the quality of your property. You can maintain good records of what's gone on in terms of maintenance, carry out regular inspections against those inventories. Maybe even as your property portfolio builds, start to think about the maintenance team and are they adding quality to them. I could tell you one story. We had a property of ours where the toilet needed to be replaced. Not an unusual situation, but the toilet had been set onto the floor and tiled around. They replaced the toilet with a completely different size pedestal. I might get that right, pedestal. When you walked in there, it was kind of like somebody had put a moat around the toilet, a very bizarre setup. So not kind of the sort of maintenance team you really want working on those. And obviously making sure you've kind of got something like emergency repair service in place, whether it be kind of British Gas Home Care or whatever, you kind of got that instant call, because issues, sure as eggs is eggs, will happen in the middle of the night when you're somewhere, you know, COVID permitting, somewhere the other side of the world. So taking care of that, and of course making sure you've got the right and appropriate landlord's insurance. So those are just a few additional items really that you're going to want to add on to all of that Sharon's talked about in terms of the quality management. That's not really going to be my focus for this afternoon. I'm the money guy. I'm kind of interested in money. I've been involved in financial service for years and years. And you learn some lessons by looking at how other businesses run. And we can take some of those lessons and apply them in a property business setting. So really, I'm going to talk next about maximizing your cash flow. And by that, I don't mean squeezing your tenants warmly by the throat or tipping them upside down and shaking them till all the coin falls out. Maximizing your cash flow, I'm going to look at from 3 kind of particular ways: rent management, cost management, margin and profit. And I'm going to start with rent management. And by that, I don't really mean just collecting the money. I mean taking care of it when things go wrong. Sharon and Steve will tell you, there's a process in place, a way that you go about the rent collection and rent arrears. And I want to talk a little bit about rent arrears, because in business terms, what rent arrears are really is bad debt. So if you think about rent arrears as bad debt, you won't go too far wrong. And if you were in any other business, bad debt kind of brings with it a whole raft of challenges. Yes, initially there could be the loss of profit on that bad debt. But in fact, bad debt is always doubly bad, because you've lost the income too. You haven't just lost the piece on the top, you haven't just lost your profit on that unpaid rent, you've lost the actual rent itself. So there's always a double whammy that kind of comes with that. And bad debt usually brings with it ongoing costs. There are always going to be costs associated with trying to recover that bad debt, and that's going to be one of the things we'll come to. But there may also be costs associated with the property that you have. So the rent's not being paid, but the costs continue. Nobody stops your mortgage payments. All of a sudden, you know, that you're still having to pay those. If it's an HMO, all of a sudden your heating bills haven't stopped just because one of your tenants has stopped paying the rent. You're still paying the heating for 5 or 6 people when there's only kind of 4 actually paying the bills. Of course, the voids themselves create another challenge. So it's almost as if bad debt, when it's finally resolved, is going to result in a void, a tenant leaving the property and leaving you a gap to fill, something to bridge. And the cost of filling voids, of course, it's always more expensive than the cost of continuation. You've got to go find another tenant. You've got to go through the credit checks. You've got to go through the referencing checks. And these are all massively valuable, but they all come at a price. They all come at a cost. And then if they're really serious, and Sharon told us a horror story from the Sunday Times a few years back, if they're really serious, then the cost of recovery, there was £26,000 in debt, but there was £10,000 of legal costs, or it sounded like there was about £10,000 of legal costs buried in that particular story. And those costs of recovery could be quite significant. There are other issues associated with bad debt, by the way. Loss of sleep, I haven't priced up on this particular slide. Ulcers, I haven't priced up on here. Poor health, loss of hair, all of those things, you know, could kind of be a cost associated with bad debt. So what do we do? How do we respond to bad debt? What's one of the ways in which we try and respond to bad debt? Well, people say, well, I don't want any bad debt. I don't want to find tenants who can't pay their bills. So what I'll do is I'll kind of reduce my rents. I'll keep them down. I won't push those rents up. I'll play safe, and then everyone's life's going to be a little bit easier. So one of the responses, like I say, is that we will, I know, drop our prices or not raise them, and we end up in this sort of position. And you might be wondering what a fish with bug eyes has got to do with property management. Well, apart from the fact that he's not the world's prettiest fish, this particular fish is, I don't know anything about fish, by the way, is a bottom feeder. And the bottom of the market is a very interesting and strange place. There are plenty of bottom feeders out there, and you can make great money from servicing the bottom of the market. Tesco's do an awesome job of selling baked beans. We live right opposite at the Heinz factory here in Wigan. And I'm pretty sure that Tesco buy a lot of beans from Heinz and sell a lot of Heinz beans. They also buy a lot of beans from other suppliers and sell a lot of beans. And that's the problem. If you're selling beans, you've got to sell an awful lot of beans to make money. Okay. Whereas non-bottom feeders, and we'll come to them in just a minute, perhaps have taken a slightly different route. So the bottom feeders kind of go through this thought process, which is, okay, got some challenges. I must fill those rooms. I really must fill those rooms. But before you drop your prices, before you kind of go down that track, I want to introduce you to my egg and cress sandwich theory. Okay, now you may have seen some of this in the advertising. I can't really lay claim to it being my own thoughts, although I put my own spin on it. The question is, why am I talking to you about egg and cress sandwiches? Well, the reason I'm talking to you about egg and cress sandwiches is at the time that we kind of came with this idea, the maths were really simple for egg and cress sandwiches. Okay, and the reason the maths were really simple is because you could go out and you could buy an egg and cress sandwich for £1. You could just buy it for £1. Now, I'm going to be slightly outrageous and say that the ingredients in this egg and cress sandwich are extraordinary. They are eggs laid by golden geese, cress plucked by a princess in the dead of night from the local stream. So the ingredients are 70p per sandwich. Okay, I expect the real ingredients, but about 7p. But you've also got costs of distribution of £20, fixed costs of distribution. And typically you sell 100 of these egg and cress sandwiches, or 100 of these kind of cheaper rooms, or whatever it is that is at the bottom there. So we've got 100 sandwiches. We've sold them all for £1. So they brought us in £100 of sales. We sold 100 sandwiches. There were some costs associated with that. 100 sets of ingredients, which was 70 quid, plus £20 of fixed costs, you know, for the van or for the sort of knife sharpener to make these said sandwiches. So with sales of £100 and cost of sales of £90, our net profit is £10. Okay, everybody with me so far? You're all still with the maths on this. Brilliant. Okay. And you think, well, that's not bad, is it? I'm making a decent profit on my egg and cress sandwiches. I'd like to make more profit, please. I'd like to earn a few more. Well, Tom will call it coin, a little more coin off my egg and cress sandwiches. So how do I make a bit more coin? Well, the obvious answer is I will sell some more egg and cress sandwiches. How are you going to sell some more egg and cress sandwiches? How are you going to fill those rooms? Well, you think, okay, maybe I should do a little offer on these egg and cress sandwiches, and maybe we should sell them for a little less. In fact, we're going to do a 10% off offer. So we're going to do a discount on our egg and cress sandwiches and sell them for 90p. Just put in the chat, if you would, if we've got if we're selling our egg and cress sandwiches for 10% more, by how much do our sales need to increase, do you think, to compensate? Okay, so we want to sell our sandwiches for 90p, not £1. That's 10% less on price. How many more sandwiches as a percentage would you say we need to sell? Just go with your gut instinct. Just whack it in the chat. Just stick it in. See what you think. 10% off the price. How many more? 10% sounds like a very sensible. What else do people think? 10%. I've got from Sharon. Twice as many, says Toby. So we have both the optimistic and the slightly more pessimistic there, which is interesting. 10%. Any other guesses? Most people would probably say 10% more. Most people would probably say 10% more. Oh, Steve says much more. We've given all the profit away. Well, let's see if that's true. So here's our original situation. We're making £10 profit on £100 of sales, and we're dropping the price to 90p. Ingredients haven't changed. There's still eggs laid by golden geese, cress picked at midnight by a princess. Our fixed costs are fixed costs, so they're still £20. So, but now we are selling, let's say, 20% more. So let's go for 20. So we drop the price by 10. We're going to sell 20% more. So our sales rise by 20% to 120. So our costs, our total sales now is 108. So that is 120 sandwiches at 90p a sandwich. And if my maths is right, it will be £108 of sales. Our cost of sales have risen a little bit because obviously we're making more sandwiches. We need more princesses and more golden geese. So we have got 120 lots of 70p of ingredients, plus our £20 of fixed costs. So our cost of sales have gone up, and of course we've made a nice profit of £4. Okay, that didn't quite work. Maybe Toby's right. Maybe we need to double the sales. So at this point, you see, you decide that what you need to do is just phone your sales team and just tell them the bad news. Of course, you pick up the phone to your sales team. They turn out they're not there. They've gone off celebrating. Why have they gone off celebrating? Well, sales up 20%. And income is up 8%. Yeah, so you've raised both sales and income, which is, after all, the job of the sales team. Regrettably, of course, your profit has dropped by 60%. If you'd have made the same call to the finance director, I'm sure you would have found him or her weeping into a large brandy or something like that. In actual fact, you'd have to go a little bit further than that, not quite as far as Toby, but up to 150 sandwiches simply to recover your net profit position. So your attempt to try and sell product at a lower price tends to backfire. In this case, it's backfired to the tune of having to make 50% more sandwiches. And I'm going to guess, guys, that if you're selling 50% more sandwiches, your fixed costs are not going to be fixed any longer. If I'm selling, if that was 100,000 sandwiches and 150,000 sandwiches, I bet I'm going to need another van to deliver the wretched things. Does that make sense? Can everybody sort of see? So let me just check the chat. Are there any questions in there about that? Everyone kind of gets that, right? So you drop your price, but you cut your margin. Your margin has thinned, and that's really what Steve was getting at in his comment earlier. So be very wary. Maybe that's not right. Maybe it's time to rethink your pricing, and that might mean rethinking the quality of your properties, the quality of your product, and the quality of your avatar. Now, we've kind of got some additional bonuses coming up a little bit later to help, but this kind of explains why we might want to reach out to quality managers like Sharon and like Steve. Because to go the other way, to go the hard route and reduce price on self-management might not be the answer. The next area I want to talk about is just maximizing your portfolio. And this is the kind of bit where a lot of us sort of run away from the numbers. And I'm going to talk about, and don't shoot me, I'm going to talk about KPIs and whether KPIs really matter. I think they do, but it's something that often scares a lot of us. Now, start with those costs. Understanding your costs, understanding where you are against those costs is really key for sort of getting the maximum benefit out of your portfolio. This is a kind of a model, if you like, a budget for our property portfolio. I'm not suggesting this is yours. I'm not suggesting this is ours, but it's a kind of a close approximation. Maybe 25% of our costs are mortgage related or lending related, 5% are insurance, 10% set aside for maintenance, professional fees at 5%, management at 10%, utilities at 10% too. And that might be your model. And if you have set your model, then you've got something against which to manage your portfolios, the outcome of your portfolios. So if my mortgage is actually cost me 22% against my 25%, that's pretty good. That sounds like my mortgage costs are where they need to be. In fact, they're rather ahead of where they need to be. I've managed to negotiate for a portfolio insurance rates of 4% instead of 5%. That sounds good. That sounds powerful. Regrettably, it's been a tough year. Someone came and stole our boiler. And one boiler, sort of, I don't know how much it cost to install there, Tom, but by the time you bought it, got all the bits, got a man in to do it, and that you probably kind of got a 1,500 quid hole in your pocket. 1,500 quid could take a while to recover. So your maintenance is 12%, and that's gone down. Professional fees 5% seem to be on the money. Management's coming on the money. Utilities, in fact, we've managed to negotiate and get a good deal, or we finally persuaded our HMO tenants to shut the windows. okay, and turn down the thermostat. I know this is fantasy land and stuff like that, but this is hardball. You know, this is one of those badges you're going to pick up as a Boy Scout. It's going to be very high heating bills and surprisingly a large number of open windows. So at the end of that, we can see from our simple KPI model on costs where the challenges are, where the opportunities are. Can we do something about that? Can we look to negotiate as a portfolio grows? Should there be a renegotiation of management fees? Or are a lot of those costs also fixed? Can we refinance our mortgage portfolio? And that's the next thing that I think I'd like to just sort of step into. And that's leverage or leverage, depends on whether you're North or South American or English, I suppose. I'm going to call it leverage because I am from the South and that's the way it goes. So this is another of your KPIs, another way to see whether your portfolio is delivering the kind of big bang, you know, the maximum bang for your buck. It's a very simple model. Doesn't have to be sort of too challenging. If you've got £800,000 of mortgages, loans, liabilities, if you will, and your portfolio has assets of £1,200, it's not going to take a genius to work out that my loan to value across my portfolio is 66%. Well, maybe it does take a genius. The maths are pretty straightforward. Excel will take all the pain out of doing this. The question is, what does 66% represent? Well, the answer is absolutely nothing, really, unless you have set some kind of target KPI. If my target KPI is 70%, then obviously a portfolio loan to value of 66 suggests there is an opportunity here, or potential opportunity to increase the leverage on that portfolio. On the other hand, I might set my target at 65% in order to try to get better rates on those mortgages or on that financing. So by changing our target, we might change our thinking. So if my target is 65 and I'm at 66%, I'm not really getting potentially the best mortgage rates I could. Is there a way for me to reduce that loan to value down below that level? And there's a couple of ways of doing that, I guess. Number one, you repay some of your loans, or number two, you increase the value of your portfolio. You go around there and you give it a lick of paint and persuade a friendly surveyor to come around, or valuer to come around and up the value by 20 grand. And that might just kind of push you over the edge. But it is a way of thinking about what it is that is right for you in your situation. Okay, so we've kept it easy. Costs, KPIs, leverage KPIs. I thought now we would talk about a weighted average cost of capital. So I thought I'd put up the WACC formula here. I guess most of you are familiar with this stuff. The bottom of the WACC curve and all. No, it doesn't. Okay, this is what businesses talk about. Businesses talk about that cost of capital. And what they're looking at is trying to get that debt equity ratio right. That's what you're trying to do in your business. And one of the things you need to do or could think about in terms of your capital is to think about how much that capital is costing you. What's the total cost of your capital? Typically in business, equity, okay, requires a higher level of return than debt. So in business terms, debt is good. In property terms, debt is still pretty good. Okay, debt is still pretty good. If you ever kind of go for long-term debt, you'll realize it's pretty cheap compared with asking someone for short-term equity loans, short-term loans, or using some of your own money as equity. So debt is usually good in business. It's certainly very good in property. So we said before we had total borrowings around about £800. Let's assume that the total mortgage cost on that £800,000 was £2,500 a calendar month. I'm doing this to kind of keep the maths simple. You realise that, don't you? Not simple for you guys, simple for me, because otherwise I'd probably fall off the screen. Then we can see that the overall cost of our capital, of the capital that we've borrowed, the debt, if you like, is 3.75%. If you have additional costs associated with that, so you may have mortgage costs and then you may have other lending, that might be a slightly different rate. But take a holistic view of your portfolio. As your property portfolio grows, start to think of it in more holistic terms rather than just property by property. And if your target, if all your modeling is at 5%, if every time you look at a property or assess a property, you assess it on a 5% cost of borrowing, then all is good in your world. Yeah, everything is good in your world. How are we doing on time? We're over. I'm told we're over. Okay, well, there was quite a lot to get through there. Those were some very quick and simple tips around managing your properties, your cash flow, and your portfolio. To help you a little bit further, we want to give you all the help that we can. And I thought what I would do is to share with everybody here today something from our Spring Micro School that looked at both kind of setting out your strategy and also creating an outline financial plan. And so we're giving everybody here today a chance to catch up. We call them lunch boxes. They are the short summary slides from week 1 and week 2 of our Spring Micro School. They're just 45 minutes, but they're packed full of ideas and information around how you might both set your strategy for building your portfolio and for setting your financial plan against which to map that portfolio. I think Cass is going to put a link in there, but it is to YouTube. So you can get these straight away. You don't have to wait for anything at all. You don't have to download anything. 2 YouTube videos. You can go and pick them up later today or whenever you've got some free time. And we'll find, hopefully, there's some real value in there to help you, let's say, build, plan, and sort of articulate your portfolio both in terms of strategy and in terms of money and finance. And that's me done, I think. It was a pretty sort of swift trawl through the wonderful world of CRESS sandwiches.
Thank you very much, Howard. I really enjoyed the egg and CRESS sandwich action. Yeah, and learning a lot, looking through those example numbers. I think it's, I don't know, it is key to look at that sort of stuff, but it turns like I'm very mindful because it's my personality type that nothing turns me off more than that sort of stuff. It's funny. I understand the importance of it. That doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, it's rubbish. I'm dismissive of it. My brain goes, that's important stuff. That's the stuff where if you want to, you know, where you've already maybe got a house or rental properties and you want to squeeze that last 10% out, which is almost like free money if you manage it well and look after it well and so on, it'll look after you. But my brain also goes, yeah, I can't be bothered, or just doesn't want to do it. And again, I suppose it comes down to, you know, in my case, knowing myself and realizing I need to outsource that to someone else to do. Because, but some people will love it. Some people will. It will be exactly. I think my business partner Chris is exactly the sort of thing to look down and sit down and look at some KPIs and mess about with Xero, whatever accountancy software. Able to use Sage, is the same sort of stuff, and go, okay, we're spending 10% more on the mortgage on this property than that property. We need to look at that. But it's really difficult. It's difficult if it's not your personality type. It's also difficult sometimes to find the time, isn't it? If you're like, I want 30 properties by the end of the year, going back to that man on the beach at the start of the show today. Like, hang on a minute, where's the man on the beach looking now starting to look at whether I can get 3.24% fixed for 5 years rather than 3.74%, or indeed, oh, I should charge more rent, less rent. You know, I need to be looking at rental properties in the area and da. So I suppose this is where it comes into to learn about yourself and maybe, you know, come and learn on a program with you guys. Or
I think that's absolutely right. I think there's a bit of grunt work in setting out the KPIs, but then having them as part of your dashboard tells you when you need to take action, or like I say, outsource, work with somebody who can take that pain away from you, or work with a system who can take that pain away from you, if indeed that feels like pain for you. But these are key, you know, if you've got your property and you've nurtured your property, you've nurtured your tenants, but you are not sort of really optimizing the income from your portfolio, then that you seriously, that feels to me like you're not quite taking your own business seriously.
Yeah, you sort of leaving money on the table, aren't you? That's free-ish money. Like making money in this game's tough. Making money in any game's tough, and so to leave money on the table is not advised. Well, smashing. Thanks for that, Howard. I know you're going to stick around now because we've got a quick Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box, and we'll welcome back to the spotlight Sharon and I think Steve. I'm going to fire away with my universal credit question, and which is to Sharon, saved up from last time, and then I'm sure we can all join in with questions and of course take any from the floor. So Sharon, I've got a tenant who's recently moved from housing benefits to universal credit, and I expected, because I dealt with this a little bit before, that because we're dealing with the government here and they tend to be mostly ranking competence, with some exceptions, but so there's this big gap where it takes 6 weeks or whatever to change over from one to the other, and then there seems to be some sort of, like, I think because it's such a large payment that then comes in to the tenant because they're not very credit worthy and so on, that their bank sort of flagged it up as a potentially fraudulent payment, which caused the delay, and so essentially I've not got it. They're great tenants, so I've no real concern that I will get it, but like Howard says, maybe that's folly, because maybe that's bad debt, so you should be taking action. So I'm asking you a question. That's the action I've decided to take, rather than in lengthy systems. I imagine you've experienced that before with either your tenants or similar situations. So wondering what actions to take. And a specific question would be, with the housing benefit system, I used to be able to get access to essentially, with their permission, to then phone the council and ask them questions, and ask the council questions about where the payments were up to. Is the same thing true of universal credit? Because if it has, I've not got around to doing it yet.
Yeah, okay. So my understanding, so to answer your last question first, my understanding is yes. So if the tenant gives you permission to speak to they'll have like a case officer, I think they're called, to speak to them on their behalf. Universal credit these days is all done through an app. So it's all done online or through a computer, which actually, in my experience, a lot of tenants find quite problematic, because the types of tenants who tend to end up on universal credit or housing benefit are probably not technologically literate, and struggle with that. So certainly Warrington Council, they actually, when you were allowed to go in, you could go into their council offices, and they would have basically effectively a hot desk computer in their lobby area. So for tenants who didn't have a computer or laptop at their own home and struggled with a phone, you could literally go into the council office, go into the lobby, go on your hot desk, but everything has to be done through what's called an online journal for universal credit. So it is difficult. In my experience, universal credit just don't answer the phone, they don't respond to any inquiries or questions either to you or the tenant. So when we've worked with tenants on universal credit, we've got the tenant messaging them, we're messaging them. I think I sent dozens of emails over the course of a couple of months and not one single response, not an even automated out of office or response. It's really, really difficult to communicate with them. So you said you've got a good relationship with the tenant, so that's key. So you need to maintain that, maintain lines of communication with your tenant, and basically get your tenant to harass them. And find out what's going on. The added complication that the bank has flagged it as a security risk, again, is an issue. I'm dealing with something similar at the moment, so I'm waiting on an international payment that's taken 2 weeks and has been flagged by my bank and the sender's bank, and we just can't get to the bottom of it. Be persistent, don't give up, and keep communication channels open would be my summary for that situation.
Smashing.
I did want to accompany some of our tenants to the council offices for to wait for our time in line to get to the terminal and make sure that everything was done correctly. And as we sat for probably a couple of hours in the benefits office, after a period of time, the tenant turned to me and said, "So what are you planning to do the rest of your day off?" I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm just coming to hang out in the benefits office. That's what I love doing, really." Like completely oblivious to it. But sometimes you just got to do that. And like Sharon said, I think quite a lot of our tenants, even the savvy ones, don't necessarily have PCs. They'll be working off the phones, which sort of makes life harder, and ropey internet links and data issues.
So it's important to be aware of that as well. Yeah. A supplementary question: HPD, which sounds like a disease, but is that some sort of supplementary loans or things people can get to do with universal credit? Is that I may have got the acronym wrong there.
I think you're referring to housing discretionary payment, Tom.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what that is basically that is something that the government has made more available as a result of the pandemic to people who are struggling. So this is something that we've directed some of our tenants who've been struggling financially to the council to inquire about. So effectively, it's a bit like a grant to pay off your rent arrears. However, through going through this process, what I've discovered is that tenants are only eligible for this if they're already claiming universal credit. So we've had one tenant who's in arrears who now claims universal credit, but his application for discretionary payment was turned down because when he applied for it, he wasn't actually receiving universal credit. So it's quite complicated.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's useful to know, and hopefully useful for other people too, because it affects more and more people. And as Howard was talking about earlier, even if you take the best tenants in the world on, their circumstances may change, and suddenly what was a private tenant can easily become a benefits tenant. Certainly something I've experienced. Something like 16 million people in this country, don't they, collect benefits, which is about 1 in 5. So
we've certainly through the pandemic, we've had some otherwise good tenants who've had decent jobs who have come into hardship as a result, and now benefits tenants. So yeah, it does happen, and with the best will in the world, whatever referencing you can do, sometimes people's life situation changes, and you've just got to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.